Trey de la Torre. He is a trauma-informed coach specializing in narcissistic abuse recovery. So Trey, please, thank you so much for being here, and let us know a little bit more about you.
I grew up in the Bible Belt in Texas, very Southern Baptist and all of everything that comes with that. And I came out much later in life, like after, trying to be somebody that I was not, and really not even that, just kind of being in denial of who I was. And when I came out 2 weeks later, I met this dude who was very charismatic, and he was funny. He kind of presented like this big kid at heart, and was also kind of telling me everything that I thought I wasn't going to be able to find, because I was so uninformed with how dating worked in the queer community, and I had my own stigmas that I just didn't understand. And so I thought that having kids was going to be a turn off. I thought, that I was 28, so like I'm old in the queer world and like all this stuff. So he's just feeding into every fear that I had, and I bought it like hook, line, and sinker. 18 months later, my life was in complete turmoil. I had gained about 30 pounds. I completely lost sight of who I was, and my relationship with my kid's mom was strained. My parents, it was strained, and it was all because this person really robbed me of a lot of things and was using manipulative tactics that completely fogged my brain and who I was and distorted my reality. And later realized that it was narcissistic abuse. And I got on TikTok one day, a couple months after I left, and started to share my story, and realized a lot of people went through this, and really got here by accident. Like I had no intention on being a content creator or social media influencer. And I even hate that term. I don't like it. It's gross, but that's what it is. And now it's turned into a passion, and it's turned into a calling. And I've always wanted to be an occupational therapist. So I started grad school for that, and I'm getting my doctorate currently. And it's pretty cool to watch how this world and occupational therapy are starting to blend. And so I say I stumbled into this, but I think it was supposed to happen exactly how it happened. And now I'm here.
I love that. I know. I think I share that. I can relate to that sort of feeling of your calling and it being meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
When you were in your abusive relationship, what was it specifically that kind of set you off to realize this is abuse?
It's really interesting. I love answering that question because I didn't realize it was abuse until the day I left him. So I went through 18 months, and I remember just saying throughout the relationship that I thought he was just very emotionally immature. Like I remember calling one of my best friends towards the end of the relationship, and I was like, I just feel like I'm dealing with an overgrown teenager. There was just this lack of emotional maturity. And I just chopped it up to that he had never had a healthy relationship before. And, he had a rough childhood. So he just didn't know what a healthy dynamic looked like. But I kicked him out of our house because I was put in this position where it was self-preservation, really. And I kicked him out. And the day he came back, which was the next day, because I allowed him to come back to get his clothes. And he said something to me where it finally made me click. It was emotionally abusive relationship. And he said, if you had just done XYZ, I wouldn't have acted that way. And here's what's crazy. I was a psychology major in undergrad. So I learned about physically abusive relationships, and that one of the things that they do is they blame, their victim. And how I get when I'm angry. So why would you get me angry, and blah, blah, blah. And so when he said that, it clicked with me. I'm like, oh my God, that's what abusers say. And that's when I realized that it was emotional abuse, but I still didn't have the term narcissism attached to it until a few weeks after that. I was on Facebook and stumbled across this article that explained narcissistic relationships. And I read it. It resonated with me, started talking about it to my therapist, and she confirmed. She was like, everything you're telling me, he definitely had narcissistic tendencies just based on my stories. So I didn't know till the end.
Wow. That's unbelievable. I think it's also a lot of people can relate to that if you don't know you don't know until you know. And then even if you know, will you leave right away? Because we all know how difficult that is. What were the steps that you took to leave, both emotionally and physically?
Yeah, it's funny. And I kind of touched on it. I didn't have steps. I was put in a position of self-preservation. I was, the reason why I didn't recognize that it was abuse is because there was no physical marks. He was never physical with me. Um, he would hit the wall and he would scream and he would throw things. Now I know that's still abuse, but at the time it's just, oh, he has an anger issue. But the day that I kicked him out, he had me backed into a corner. He was spitting on my face. He had his fist balled up and the veins were popping on his neck. He had the black eyes. He was there, but he wasn't there. And I didn't know who this person was in front of me. And I just had this moment of, if I don't do something right now, I'm going to get hurt. And that's when I said, get out. So it was kind of this perfect storm for me, because this was right when COVID had started as well. It was in May of 2020. So we had just gotten our stimulus checks. So I happened to have a decent amount of money that I had just gotten set aside. And I realized I was able to be in a position where I didn't need him financially. The amount of money that I had was going to at least get me through my lease. And I knew I could just figure it out after that. So I didn't have steps. It was kind of divinely ordained, where it just all happened at the exact moment that it needed to happen.
Sometimes it's just perfect.
Yeah, and I know that's very atypical, and you need a plan. And I emotionally was starting to get to the point where I had at least decided. I gave it a time limit, because again, this was like April-ish when I started to feel this way, and our lease was up in September. And I had decided that if things didn't get significantly better by September, when the lease was done, I was out. So I did have a plan, but I didn't get the opportunity to put that plan in place.
Right, just sort of kicked in before that. So, I mean, it's ultimately better that it ended sooner.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you describe as your biggest emotional challenges that kept you in the relationship longer than you should have stayed?
The number one thing for me was guilt. Guilt was a major factor, because of my recent coming out story that I had. I was married to a woman at the time, great woman. Honestly, our life was great. But it was like one of those things where my love for her was not a lie. It just wasn't the only truth. But I hurt her in the process, and I hurt a lot of people in that process as well too. And I felt really guilty about it, because she didn't deserve that. Ultimately, I made the decision because I loved her enough to find someone that could love her better than I could. But I still felt really guilty of the pain that I caused her, caused my parents, caused my children, caused everyone involved. So guilt was a major factor, because subconsciously I felt like I deserved the treatment that I was getting. I had a very unhealthy fear of being alone. I didn't want to go through this whole coming out journey just to end up alone. I could have stayed in a relatively happy relationship and kept with this picture perfect life that I had, as opposed to going through all of this and just end up by myself. My life at the time, my life had less meaning if I didn't have a partner. And that was something that I worked on later after I got out. And then probably another thing, and this is just, I'm a Taurus, and I'm a true Taurus. I'm stubborn AF, and I just really wanted to prove everyone wrong about him. I wanted to be right. I wanted to prove that I knew him better than they did. And that's why that was another big motivating factor for me.
Oh, there's like 20 questions I could go into on that, but we'll stick on the subject that I, of more specifically your relationship, I guess. But what would you say, when you left the relationship, what did you struggle with overthinking?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Decision, bad decision,
Yeah, that really started about 2 weeks after I left. At first, I was kind of okay. Like I was kind of at peace with everything. And then 2 weeks after, which this is a whole separate story, but I found out that he had been cheating the last 5 months of our relationship. Um, that is when I felt the most broken. And that is when all of it started, because everything that I had found out about him, I wasn't surprised by. I wasn't surprised about the things that he was lying about. I wasn't surprised about some of the things he was doing behind my back that I figured out. None of that stuff really surprised me, because if I was honest with myself, I always knew there was a small, pretty big portion of just like BS that surrounded him. But that was the one thing that I actually believed he wouldn't have done, because he fed me this story throughout the relationship that his ex-husband cheated on him. So he knows how that feels and he can never do that to someone and blah, blah, blah. And it was one of the few times that he actually appeared very genuine. So I believed him. And so when I found out that he did that too, I was like, wow, nothing about this person was real. And that's when my overthinking started. And it just felt very addictive. It felt out of my control. I had impulses like unblocking his social media, and I was creating fake accounts on dating sites to try to find him and all this stuff. Like, I mean, it was so out of my control. I was thinking things about like, what is he saying about me to other people, trying to figure out what his narrative was. What is he doing now? What's his story? I was very also caught up in the cheating aspect, and I just really wanted that acknowledgement that he did it. And I wanted to know the details. I know of 3 people that it happened with at least, but I was like, was it more than that? Did it happen in the bed? Did it happen on the couch? Was it just at the house? Was it at work? And it was like, every time I got one answer, it like opened the door to 20 more questions. And it was exhausting.
Oh my God. I can also relate, as many of us can. So you've written a course on rumination. Is that thinking of yours, that overthinking and ruminating on the relationship and what happened, is that really what led you to want to write that course?
That was because that was the hardest cycle of my healing to get over. But really, the main driver behind me writing this course was I went through most of this journey on my own. I mean,
Mhm.
yes, I had a very supportive family. I mean, my God, they were just counting the days to when I would leave him. So I mean, they were supportive, but they didn't understand. They thought I should have gotten over it faster. Like, they didn't get the mental fog that I was in. I had a few friends that had been through something like this. Other friends that again were supportive but didn't quite get it. So the day-to-day aspects, like how to stop this thinking, how to redirect my thoughts, how to start reclaiming activities for myself, how to start moving forward and shift my energy from looking back and to looking forward, I didn't get help with any of that. So I had to figure this all out on my own. And it was a lot of trial and error. And I wanted to create this course that was well laid out. It was experience based, easy to follow. It's tangible on just how to stop the overthinking and obsessively thinking. I think that's the best word for how it felt for me. It was an obsession. Um, I was in the business world for a while before I went to grad school. And one of the things they always talk about was like, find a mentor, that's walked this journey already, so you don't make the same mistakes that they did. And to me, that's the kind of the mindset that I had of writing this course, is kind of being that intangible mentor for people of, I've done this, I've walked through this, I know how it feels, but more importantly, I know how to get past it. And that was the whole goal of it.
Yeah, that's amazing, actually, because there's so much content out there, of course, about how to heal, but the real practical steps, I think, is what's so great about having an online course. So that's amazing. I'm really glad that you have put that together. Would you say that there's kind of key messages that you can share with us about how to stop ruminating?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you have to come to a place to accept the reality of what happened to you and accept the reality of who they are. And that's really painful. And we try to avoid that. If you think about it, during the relationship, we also spent a lot of times excusing their behavior, and we have to stop that. Like, they are who they are. They did what they did, and it happened. And if you keep holding on to this delusion of who they wanted you to think they were, then you're never going to be able to move forward. And there's a big difference between reaching acceptance and understanding. And I feel like sometimes in this overthinking cycle, we get very wrapped up just trying to understand but we're never going to understand because we can't. We're not like them. We're not capable of doing the things that they do. So we would have to reduce ourselves down as a human being in order to understand. Well, I don't know about you, but that's not worth it for me. But that doesn't mean I can't accept it. I can accept what happened without understanding it. So that's super important. Number two, this one always surprises people, but reclaiming meaningful activities in your life, because we were so robbed of the things that brought us joy, or the things that brought us joy now have some kind of negative connotation to them because of the abuse. So like I've worked with clients who, the one I see the most surprisingly is cooking. Like there's so many people that used to love to cook, but every time they cooked for their narcissistic ex, they were criticized, or a fight was brought out, or it was never good enough in this and that, and now they just can't even, they don't even want to do it. And so it's reclaiming these things that they robbed from us, which is honestly kind of what started my whole journal that I wrote. When we can reclaim these activities for ourselves one by one, then ultimately we're slowly but surely reclaiming our life as a whole. There's 4 total. So my third would be correcting the negative self-beliefs, because with narcissism, it's either going to plant new negative beliefs, or it's going to reaffirm old belief systems that we've had since we were a child. So like for me, it was, I'm not enough, or I'm not handsome enough, or whatever in that category. So the cheating really affirmed an old negative belief that I've had since I was 12, because I've had major body issues since I was, body image issues since I was in middle school. And the thing that I've learned in occupational therapy school so far is that our beliefs affect our thoughts, which affect our actions. And sometimes we get so focused on trying to change the action, which we do need to, like we need to put some new healthier actions set in place. But if we don't tackle the belief system, then we're not taking care of the root of the problem. And then the last thing that I would say is just accepting the fact that the closure comes from your own redemption. Like we are never going to get closure from them. Sometimes you might not even be able to get closure and justice from the legal system. Emotional abuse doesn't exist in the legal system. If you can at least go for it, I say go for it. But your ultimate redemption, your ultimate, or I should say, your ultimate closure really comes from your own redemption. And when you can accept that, then again, you can start moving forward to actually redeeming your life.
That last one really kind of sits with me, because I know we all get obsessed with the idea of justice, to a degree, revenge, which may or may not be the completely right word, but we are obsessed with but I need the acknowledgement. I need that. And if you're never going to get it, the need aspect of that needs to be shifted. You don't need it. You want it badly, but you're not going to get it.
You deserve it. Like that's the thing that's frustrating, is you deserve the justice and you deserve that. But I had to at least redefine what justice meant for me.
Yeah, I so did as well, and let go of the injustice, anyway, that's amazing. And I really appreciate you explaining all of that and sharing that with us. You mentioned that you have a journal, so the Wellness Wheel journal, I know, and I love it. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? How is it helping people?
The biggest feedback that I get for people, or that I've gotten from people, is that it's helped them redefine what self-care really means, because society and the beauty industry as a whole has really distorted the meaning of self-care and kind of almost has created these myths that we have about self-care, like I can't afford it, or I don't have time, or all of this. But really the most powerful form of self-care is the small, again, meaningful activities that you have quick access to, and that allows you to have a balance. And it also kind of shifts the focus that it's never safe for anything really to have all of your eggs in one basket. So if your only form of self-care is, let's just say, I'm a big fan of this, so I'm not knocking it, but let's just say your only form of self-care is going to the tanning salon. Well, what if you go to your tanning salon and the electricity is out? Sometimes you have this and I worked in tanning, so I've witnessed this. Sometimes people have this disproportionate response to what's going on, and they freak out. And it's Well, they're freaking out because this is the only thing that they can do for themselves. This is the only thing that they do for themselves throughout the week. But if you're really having a focus of like spending quality time with your friends and spending quality time with your family, and having like that 20 minutes where you just check in with your emotions or journaling or whatever, and you're scattering this out throughout the week, you have a balanced practice of taking care of yourself. And again, it goes back to the fact that we were robbed from that during this relationship. We didn't have, even if our abuser didn't specifically say, you can't go to the gym, you can't go tan, you can't go hang out with your friends, we were so emotionally weighed down, we didn't have the emotional capacity to take care of ourselves. Because my abuser never said, you can't have friends. He never said that. But did I hang out with my friends over the 18 months of our relationship? Not unless he was there. So I didn't have the energy to take care of myself and work out and all that. I was exhausted the entire time. So it's just, again, it's about that tangible way of like, how can I take care of myself, but how can I balance taking care of myself in a meaningful way that's intentional for myself.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So Trey, where can people find you online or work with you as a coach?
So I'm pretty much everywhere now at this point. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. My handle is I was like yo Trey. It's altered a little bit, but in some platforms. But on TikTok, you can pretty much find everything from there. So it's I was like yo _Trey. And that if you go there, there's a beacons link in my bio that gives you access to everything. You can also just go straight to my website as well, which has access to like my course and my journal and my coaching services, which is treydelatorre.podia.com. And that has more about my story and stuff on that too. So either one of those.
So glad. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. And I look forward to seeing you again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
No problem.